So it's not every day that I respond to videos on TikTok, but that's the platform the subject of today's video is using, so I'm gonna do what I can to work with that. This guy goes by the name J-Rod, and he responds to some of my MCU Spider-Man videos and other Spider-Man movie criticism that I agree with. Now, I recommend watching my videos first if you want to understand some of the MCU Spider-Man criticism in full context and detail, or just stick around for the entertainment if that's what you prefer. And while I disagree with the majority of the arguments that I've seen from him, I can respect his dedication to responding to criticism instead of just lazily dismissing them. Just a reminder not to harass anyone that I respond to, keep all of the disagreements civil, and if J-Rod is watching this, I'm down to have a one-on-one discussion on these movies if you're interested. You seem like a passionate guy and I think it would be a fun conversation. Now, I don't use TikTok, so that's not going to be a reliable way to reach me, but, you know, there's the comments, there's my Discord server in the description. We'll see what works out if you're interested. With that said, let's take a look at his responses.
This is one of the worst attempts at criticizing Spider-Man Far From Home.
Okay, look, I know we don't like the person who made this video, but this was the best video there is of J-Rod addressing Far From Home criticism for Peter's character. It's at least the most detailed one, and this is the best video we're gonna have for reference.
So the entire world is at risk of being destroyed, and Peter doesn't want to help. The fact that he even needs to be convinced of this is already dumb.
No, it isn't, because similar to the books, Peter is shirking his responsibility because he believes other people can handle it.
Okay, so there's already a bit of an issue with this counterpoint. For one, Colin is criticizing this film based on its internal consistency, not based on comic accuracy, since that's ultimately irrelevant to whether or not a contained story holds up on its own. Second of all, the situations presented are not the same. In the comic, this is a generic robbery, which Peter can reasonably believe the cops can handle. This is not quite the same as a world-ending threat that Mysterio explicitly states that he fought before, with an army, and still failed to prevent his world from ending.
I was part of the last battalion left trying to stop them.
There's only one left. Fire.
The strongest of them all, the one that destroyed my Earth. It's the one that took my family.
There's a drastic difference between a robbery that the cops are handling versus a threat that Mysterio explicitly states he can't handle on his own based on prior knowledge, not to mention the end of the world. Also, there's a reason Cullen in his video doesn't criticize Peter when he's unaware of the threat and doesn't even know there's a dire situation. He criticizes his character once he's aware of it. And a key thing to note here is that in the same comic, since we're talking about it, the basis for Peter intervening when one guy is in danger is that nobody else is around to help him except for Peter. In Far From Home, nobody can help Mysterio except for Peter. So it stands to reason that if the consequence of failure is the world literally ending, all of Peter's loved ones are going to get killed, and Peter should be agreeing to help in some way. Now, if the movie for some reason had Captain Marvel and the Hulk helping out, I would actually agree with you this time around because there's no explicit confirmation that Peter is needed, and he has reason to believe in the most powerful of superheroes to help out. The thing is, Mysterio failing to beat the fire elemental with an army is an explicit confirmation that Peter is needed.
And this doesn't go against what we previously saw. This movie establishes from the start that Peter has lost his confidence. This entire journey is about him getting it back.
Then why help with the water monster if he's so lacking in confidence? Is it because he has no choice because people are in danger? I agree, but the same applies to the fire elemental that is projected to destroy the world if nobody helps. What does Peter think will happen if Mysterio fails? Which is what happened the last time he fought the same threat with more help because he had an army.
But let's look at the reasons he gives. One, his identity, despite the fact that he literally just helped out earlier with the water monster. But okay.
Off the bat, we're being disingenuous because Peter tried to conceal his identity.
He's not disputing that Peter tried to protect his identity against the water monster, although he kinda doesn't at one point, but whatever. What he's disputing is that the risk of Peter's identity was accepted anyway when Peter had less effective means of concealing his identity. So why would his secret identity stop him from saving the world? That certainly didn't stop him in Infinity War.
Plus, there was immediate danger. And that's different than agreeing to go into battle. What was he supposed to do? Not help?
No, he's very glad that he helped out because that makes sense for his character. Also, this doesn't address the fact that Peter is functionally doing the same thing by refusing to help fight the fire elemental.
Two, I just want to go on a vacation with my girlfriend. Okay, MJ is gonna die, and so will everyone you know, so that's a shit excuse.
Yeah, guys, could you imagine that? A teenager with misplaced priorities. That's just unheard of.
So, it's okay for Peter to knowingly endanger his loved ones because he's a teenager? Like, even ignoring how messed up that is, do teenagers not have basic self-preservation? Now, I've made this joke quite a few times, but I'll do it again anyway. Even Homelander would get involved in this situation. You wanna know why? Because he still has self-preservation instincts, which I would also expect from Peter, alongside the fact that Peter would be held to a much higher moral standard than Homelander would be.
Three, he doesn't think he's good enough. So do you think you're not good enough to be alive either? Because that's the threat.
Yeah, Peter doesn't think he could do shit against this fire monster or any other world-ending threat.
Is that why he shot a web at a water monster? You can call that desperate, but hey, at least he's trying something. Which is, you know, the thing he said he intended to do.
I can help, Let me help!
He also says after this, I'm just happy I don't have to go to Prague. Your main reason you don't want to do this is because you don't feel like you're good enough. Now why do you turn around and say this, seeming as though you're happy about this, instead of worried your world might fucking die and you're gonna do nothing about it?
It's almost like people avoid their problems when they're too afraid to face them. Yeah, I don't understand how this is contradictory at all.
Because if Peter's reasoning for not helping is that he doesn't think he'll make a difference, while he has full reason to believe that Mysterio's efforts alone won't stop the fire monster, given how it went when he had an army to back him up, then Peter should at least show concern for the world ending. The point of highlighting this moment is to show that he isn't worried about the world ending, which is dumb for his character, even if we accept that he's just that doubtful of himself.
This also puts Peter's whole class in the crossfire by moving them to the same city. And Peter also doesn't get pissed at Fury for putting his classmates in the same city where stuff will be going down.
I mean, it's clear Peter was upset with Fury. He even brought it up later. This guy even takes issue with how that is handled.
Peter mentions how his friends are in danger now because they were brought here, which makes Fury start yelling at Peter because of the stuff that happened on the bus, and telling him he's not ready. Now, remember this scene from Spider-Man Homecoming?
This would have happened if you would just listen to me!
So now I ask, why is Peter just sitting here taking this shit from Fury? This is just completely out of
But
character.
he's not the same kid he was from Homecoming. He's not gonna lash out against someone who helped save the world.
Tony saved the world in both Avengers movies. That's not a meaningful distinction.
Especially now when Peter is, again, doubting himself. Of course he's not gonna have the courage to stand up for himself.
So the point being made is that Peter should stand up for his friends more, because Fury just endangered them for no good reason. It doesn't matter if he doubts himself, because that is a separate issue to someone actively risking his friends dying. He did that on purpose just to get Peter involved. This should set Peter off no matter how he feels about himself, because it wouldn't be himself that he's defending in this situation, it would be his friends that he's defending.
So how is it that instead of seeing this as a parallel to that scene in Homecoming, you just said, nah, it's out of character? Now, to be fair, this guy brings up a lot of valid points regarding the plot, like the Edith glasses and the framing of Tony Stark. But I'm sorry, when I hear shit like this, it makes me wonder how many people actually know what a fucking character arc is.
Okay, well, disagreements aside, at least he's willing to acknowledge that the movie isn't perfect.
Okay, it's not flawless.
This next video is more of a general one, but it makes comparisons to two other movie versions that I think are worth responding to.
If you ever want proof that Spider-Man fans are unfair to MCU Spider-Man, just compare the way they judge Tom taking a break to Andrew and Tobey. Because people love to criticize Far From Home, saying Peter shouldn't want to take a vacation, he should want to be Spider-Man 24/7.
So I think that's a slight straw man. I don't think I've seen anyone say Peter should never want a vacation, but there's a difference between wanting a vacation and choosing the most crucial of times to take it. I wouldn't mind Peter taking a vacation if this was after the fire elemental. The problem is that you can't physically go on a vacation when the world is completely destroyed. The issues people have with that moment are contingent on this exact detail.
Keep in mind, he just wants 1 week of normalcy after the Infinity War.
Okay, that's great. Take the vacation after you've prevented the world from dying. Is that too much to ask for Spider-Man of all people?
Andrew was a shit Spidey and couldn't save his girlfriend. Took a year off.
And guess what? That's weak writing for Andrew Spider-Man as well. The movie seems to imply that Peter quit for 5 whole months because he lost hope after Gwen died, and would only become Spider-Man if he just listened to her speech one time. Like, okay, that's an entire character arc in itself that was crammed into the ending and barely explores Peter's thought process, or the larger effects that this has on New York City. That in itself should be a different movie. Also, it's kinda funny how you're using The Amazing Spider-Man 2 as a reference when that movie was thoroughly panned since its release. One of its criticisms being that Peter is a total psycho, because he kinda is.
What about Tobey? Life simply got too hard. He decided this Spider-Man shit is for the bird.
But notice that Tobey didn't quit as soon as he wanted to. If Tobey actually quit just because he wanted to, then he would have quit as soon as he lost his job, or as soon as he missed MJ's play. Peter quits being Spider-Man not because he wants to, but because he's convinced that he's losing his powers because he's simply not fit to be Spider-Man.
Maybe you're not supposed to be Spider-Man climbing those walls. That's why you keep falling.
That's an entirely different motivation from a guy who has his powers, refusing to help because he wants to go on a vacation. I'm sure Tobey would like to do the same, but that's not his reasoning. It took more than him simply wanting a break for him to quit. It took him believing that it was the better choice for him to quit. Also, in Spider-Man 2, he feels bad for failing to save someone in the burning building. In Far From Home, Peter gets told that villages are destroyed, and he doesn't show any remorse for ignoring the calls. In fact, he doubles down.
A village in Mexico was wiped out by a cyclone. 3 days later, a similar event in Morocco. A village was destroyed by what may well be another world-threatening...
But it doesn't sound right when I criticize these two, right? Because it's normal to want to break after a tragedy or simply after shit gets too hard. If you want to say for Tom's case, he was more irresponsible because lives were in immediate danger.
That's a pretty big difference, and the fact that the world itself was at stake.
This is the fucking MCU. Yes, this goes against his code, but he knows other people can handle it. Like, for example, in Far From Home, he thought Mysterio could handle the elemental.
Mysterio explicitly told him that he couldn't handle it with an army, humanity, and that's the explanation for why his world got destroyed. There's no comparison to be made here.
But that's all part of his arc, because Peter himself needs to step up, which we all know he does.
Okay, but he stepped up in Infinity War when he knew that the Earth was at stake, and he knew other heroes were there to help.
You can't be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man if there's no neighborhood.
Honestly, if you wanted to make a comparison, you should compare the MCU version to the version that's actually worse.
You're saying the lives of a billion strangers are more important than my loved ones?
Now this next video is going to be a bit of a break from the MCU, because as I was trying to navigate this guy's TikTok, I found this other video, and since the last one was about criticizing adaptations under the same standard, I might as well add input on this because I think he is a bit too charitable to some stuff in the Raimi trilogy, even though I think 1 and 2 are pretty damn good. Now, in his description, he says that neither Peter or MJ are evil, Raimi was just writing a love story chock full of humanity, which seems to not be a complete moral defense, but rather a justification for the writing. Now the first clip I play is going to be a bit long, but that's to give context that will help for later.
Was Peter wrong for kissing Gwen right in front of MJ? Yes, duh. But simply because so many people hate this version of the character, they will spin any scenario to make her look like the evil one. Let's go over all the common cases for defending Peter in this scene. Most recent defense I've heard is that Peter was simply playing up the Spider-Man character, claiming that it's no different from Mary Jane being an actress on stage. She could possibly have a kissing role. I'm sorry, how can you not realize this is a clear apples to oranges situation? Unlike in a film or a play, there's no illusion being maintained here. Spider-Man was well within reason to deny the crowd's very weird request and not kiss the police captain's daughter. Oh, but he would have killed the vibe. If that's your argument, please realize what's more important, killing the vibe or killing your relationship. And especially considering the fact he knew Mary Jane was watching, like he's being deliberately obtuse. You guys are right there with it. This was supposed to be looked at as a bonehead move. It's a clear example of Peter indulging in himself.
So I agree that Peter should not be defended here, but I don't see how this plays into a love story chock full of humanity. In order to facilitate this drama, Peter has to be written out of character to achieve this. Cheating on MJ just to please the crowd is obviously a bad idea, and since Peter is not Spider-Man for the reward, this would not motivate him to kiss Gwen in front of MJ. What doesn't help is that this is after Peter experienced Harry being upset when he catches Peter and MJ holding hands, and the fact that this was after Spider-Man 2, where he wanted to win over MJ so badly, and was constantly aware of how his failures kept affecting her.
The second defense I've heard for Peter in this scene is that MJ's a piece of shit, so who cares? This argument has almost no merit to it. I'm not saying that Mary Jane is without flaw. Out of all the evil shit she's done, Mary Jane has never done something like this to Peter. Are you guys forgetting who she actually cheated on? In Peter's case specifically, Mary Jane was never all too bad to him. Of course, there's the elephant in the room, being this scene. But if you ask me, Mary Jane was way more justified than Peter was for kissing Gwen on stage.
Neither of them are morally justified for sure, but these are both internally inconsistent for their characters. I've explained Peter on a basic level. For MJ, cheating on Peter like this is especially uncharacteristic. Sure, Peter shouldn't be dumb enough to think it's not a big deal, but that at least implies Peter wasn't willfully falling in love with someone else while committed to MJ. So it's less so Peter being two-faced, but more so him being dumb. The problem is that MJ not only forgave Peter for it,
and I know that you made a mistake and that you feel guilty. I want to be here for you.
but also MJ was actually committing to Harry in the scene while Peter at least saw it as an act. This is worse, especially since MJ should know better after calling Peter out for this.
I'm not saying cheating is ever justified, but you have to look at this from Mary Jane's perspective. He simply wanted to be heard, and Peter can't even give her that because he's too focused on his fame as Spider-Man.
Which is kinda dumb. Why is Peter so focused on his fame that he doesn't listen to MJ? I thought this was the same Peter Parker who constantly listened to MJ voicing her problems and willingly apologized for his own failures. Now he can't apologize when caught in a serious failure? Not to mention that again, Peter isn't Spider-Man for the reward. We figured this out in movie 1. Why is this a problem in movie 3? Now as for MJ, I get she wants to be heard. That doesn't mean she would cheat on Peter. Under her perception, she thinks Peter regrets the decision anyway, so why cheat on him at all? He seems to have an issue with this in Spider-Man 2, and while that is a problem, it's worse in Spider-Man 3, because she's older now, and it was at least established that she did that kiss to find out pivotal information. Which is not a great excuse, but it's better than Spider-Man 3 having no excuse.
Once again, indulging in himself. And whenever he does give Mary Jane advice, it doesn't really come from a place of emotional intelligence. Sometimes people don't want advice. Mary Jane, she just wanted to be heard. Peter wasn't ready to give her that yet. Just had a little bit more character development to get through. Meantime, Mary Jane confided in someone else who was able to give her that listening ear. Again, not justifying it, but trying to help y'all understand.
Yeah, I understand what it's going for, but it doesn't have have to write Peter and MJ uncharacteristically to get there. I don't see how this is a love story chock full of humanity, because it reaches a point where it's less so that they're acting human, but their actions seem manufactured for plot reasons. That doesn't really feel chock full of humanity. So these next ones will directly or indirectly address my videos. Since we just talked about Far From Home, let's stick with that one before we jump to Homecoming.
Why is Iron Man painted out to be a villain in the MCU Spider-Man movie? Let's start with Mysterio, where some people have pointed out that he was kind of justified, as Tony Stark openly stole credit for his creation.
Seeing that this was actually Quentin Beck's creation, okay, so to interrupt myself, I never said Mysterio was justified in Far From Home. All I did was outline that his work was never given proper credit during the presentation, which would have led to anybody watching this to believe that this was Tony's creation when he says this is his experiment, which I assume plays into Mysterio's idea that he doesn't get enough recognition. He openly takes credit for the technology and leads everybody to believe that this was his own design.
Except this isn't true if you go back and actually watch the fucking scene. Stark's wording is intentional because he said he funded the project.
$611 million for my little therapeutic experiment. No one in their right mind would have ever funded it.
I'm lost as to how this is a counter. I can fund my own experiments, I can fund my own work. If anything, showing a clip of him calling it my experiment reaffirms that he's taking credit for the work.
Okay, it was Beck's creation, and I guess you could fault Tony for failing to mention Quentin Beck in his speech to the college student. Also, just because it wasn't directly stated in the speech, you can assume that Beck was given credit in some form or fashion.
Why wouldn't Tony give him credit for his own project during the speech when his entire speech is about reframing the future by funding all of these student projects? Wouldn't that be the appropriate time to give credit by showing that his funding helped someone else create revolutionary technology? It's not as inspiring if they simply believe Tony made this, so this is a weird thing for him to leave out in the speech.
If not, Tony would be facing serious legal action. Then again, Tony Stark really wouldn't have to worry about facing legal action because he funded the project.
Okay, so we went from he must have given credit or he'd be in legal trouble to he didn't have to give credit anyway because legally he is protected. Now, I'll throw him a bone here. Yes, legally he can probably claim that this is his property, but ethically speaking, it's still just a dick move to not give any credit to him. And he didn't play this in the video, which I kinda understand since TikTok is in short form, but then again, it's probably not the most effective way to respond to long form videos with short form ones, but I go into detail as to how Tony personally experienced the villain being created by the belief that Stark has stolen his family's ideas. Taking credit for other people's creations is definitely not in character for Tony Stark. In fact, believing that the Stark family steals from others and gets the full recognition was precisely what motivated Whiplash in Iron Man 2.
You come from a family of thieves and butchers. The true history of Stark's name will be written, but your father did to my family over 40 years. Will do to you in 40 minutes.
Iron Man 3 touches upon how Tony creates some of his own villains through his own mistakes, and what was smart about that movie is that they had Tony willingly treat people unfairly before he had his experience in the cave, before he grew more generous and aware of the consequences and implications of his actions. That is specifically relevant context as to why I'm making this point.
There would be no Mysterio without that Tony Stark money. Even with all that being said, that's not even what Beck is upset about. Not once in his grand speech does he mention that he was upset because Tony stole credit.
First of all, Beck is upset about how Tony can receive recognition but he can't, no matter how smart he is. The fact Beck is barely recognized for his revolutionary work would factor into his belief system. Second of all, that's not even my point. Whether that was Beck's larger gripe is irrelevant to whether or not it's in character for Tony Stark to present his work in this way.
Beck is simply upset because the technology that he possibly wanted to weaponize is being turned into a joke. This next part has been pointed out before. Mysterio's recounting is completely different. Mysterio's version, the audience laughs when Tony names the project Bar. In the actual Civil War movie, it's radio silent.
But my reference was what Tony did in the Civil War movie, not just Far From Home. I think what is minimally true is that this is Beck's technology, hence why we see it used by him in the movie.
If that wasn't enough, this whole movie is telling us we can't trust this dude. Anyways, moving on to this guy's next point.
And when Tony fires Beck for being unstable, doesn't put him under any kind of watch list. If he did, Edith would have warned Peter about him at the bar.
Sorry, but why are we operating off of the assumption that Tony Stark puts everyone he fired on a watch list?
I never said he should put everyone he fires on a watch list. There's a multitude of reasons you can fire someone. I specified that Beck is mentally unstable and has access to technology that Tony would know is highly weaponizable. And when Tony fires Beck for being unstable, he doesn't put him under any kind of watch list. If he did, Edith would have warned Peter about him at the bar. Again, Beck is someone Tony perceives to be highly unstable with access to illusion tech that can replicate anyone's voices and looks to 100% realism. With that technology, technology, you can quite literally ruin any legal standards used for evidence. You can conduct really dangerous scams. It's ridiculous that Tony would ever fund this, and it's extra ridiculous that Tony didn't take any precautions in case he snaps one day and uses the illusion tech to his advantage. You know, kinda like the many villains he created in the past. Tony didn't keep tabs on Beck, or, you know, alert Nick Fury about this guy so he keeps him in their files. It'd be really suspicious if all these ex-Stark employees just started grouping up to pray for Tony's downfall. If only there were people looking into this. And like I said in the video, Edith would have told Peter about this if he was actually kept on file.
Even if that were the case, I'd imagine his day-to-day duties at Stark Industries would take a back seat during the fallout of the Avengers, and not to mention the Infinity War.
Civil War and Infinity War are 2 years apart. That's more than enough time to get this guy on file. In Iron Man 3, it shows that Tony stores databases of information that can aid an investigation, and given that Beck has access to weaponizable tech and is mentally unstable, he should have kept him on file.
I've compiled a Mandarin database for you, drawn from SHIELD, FBI, and CIA intercepts.
We even get proof of this when Tony Stark says that the Vulture is below their pay grade.
Yeah, and that's a problem in Homecoming. Vulture is a guy with access to alien tech weapons that contended with the Avengers, and the shootout with the FBI clearly showed that they're
hopelessly, hilariously outgunned.
Yeah, rely on guys with bullets to take down a group of people that have access to bulletproof technology and can literally cause mass destruction.
Not a great plan.
Speaking of the Vulture, while he might have been right about Tony Stark, all fail to forget that Tony's entire journey is about overcoming his mistake.
I don't think Tony needs to learn that you should compensate people when you terminate their contracts, because with all of the money they invested, they can make them go homeless, especially in the post-2012 New York City. The basis for Tony's change in Iron Man 1 was realizing the harm that his actions were causing. I think making sure people don't go homeless is pretty standard for him. This is why he uses his money to help out others, such as the Stark Relief Foundation.
Really doesn't redeem himself till his sacrifice in Endgame. Even though he's never outright a villain in these movies, Spider-Man movies simply explore his bad side. Sorry if you don't want to hear it, but Tony Stark wasn't magically turned into some saint after Iron Man 1.
The entire Iron Man trilogy explores his bad side, so does Age of Ultron and Civil War. But the difference here is that he doesn't willingly screw people over. When he agreed to terminate city contracts to clean up New York, there are terms he would have to have signed off on before the joint venture takes off. Part of those terms would be compensating the people they'd be forcing out of work when they would have spent tons of money on resources to do it. Hell, given that they'd need more staff, he could offer them jobs within damage control, given how full their hands would be. He doesn't try anything to mitigate the harm this has on workers. In Iron Man 3, they had him screw over Killian before his experience in the cave, which actually works within the MCU timeline, hence why Tony is shown to be more humble to strangers in the present and acknowledges that he mistreated Killian. In Age of Ultron, he only created Ultron because he thought he would help protect the world. He didn't know that Ultron would act up, and believed Jarvis would be able to contain him. And in fairness, Jarvis did bounce back, and it was made clear that he mitigated Ultron's reach in the movie.
You still going after launch codes?
Yes, he is, but the codes are constantly being changed.
By whom?
Our ally? The guy protecting the military's nuclear codes? I found him. Ultron didn't go after Jarvis because he was angry. He attacked him because he was scared of what he can do. So Jarvis went underground. Right? Scattered, dumped his memory, but not his protocols.
Now in this next video, he doesn't directly address me, but it's clear he's referencing my Homecoming criticisms, and a later video shows that he's clearly seen my video, which is totally fine considering this video is just a general addressing of his thoughts on the movie.
Talk about some negatives. A biggest one being, how was he able to operate for so long without the Avengers, damage control, or anyone taking notice? To that I say, most of the Avengers aren't even full-time heroes. I mean, let's go over the roster, shall we? For one, Hawkeye and Black Widow are agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. more than anything else. Hulk only comes out when the world is about to end. Captain America was fighting his 90-year-old best friend and is constantly fighting Hydra. Then you have Thor, who is off-world like 90% of the time.
So I understand that not all of the Avengers would be involved, but a decent portion would. I mean, all you really need is Iron Man and the movie is over. Now, I'm gonna play a section from my video that explains why Stark, Damage Control, and S.H.I.E.L.D. would have been able to catch the Vulture. And once you see this point in full context, it makes it pretty clear why this is blatantly impossible. I think the initial problem lies in why they shouldn't have gotten far to begin with. We know that S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony Stark, and Damage Control would have interest in salvaging the alien technology to avoid it falling into the wrong hands. Tony would especially feel responsible for this considering it was his fight, and he strongly believes in personal accountability, while S.H.I.E.L.D. monitors potential threats, and would have awareness of the potential that the alien tech has for weapons weapons of mass destruction.
Ebo is really that naive? SHIELD monitors potential threats.
Captain America's on threat
We all are.
That means that all the parties I've mentioned would want to keep tabs on any salvaging operations on record that have contracts within the city, because there's a chance that they've already retrieved exotic material and can disobey damage control's orders to turn it over. SHIELD regularly operates to account for these potential outcomes. They would also have interest in finding any traces of alien tech in general before other people can pick up on them at random areas in the city. And how might SHIELD, Tony Stark, and damage control manage to keep track of the alien tech as well as the salvaging operations? Well, for starters, let's take a look at this scene later in the film.
It's saying there was an energy pulse right here.
There's no sign of the weapon, and even if it was here, now it's gone.
What this line is referring to is when Peter banged the Chitauri energy core and caused an unwanted reaction. This energy pulse was picked up on by the Vulture's crew. So if the Vulture's crew is capable of tracing their weapons when they give off energy pulses from miles away, don't you think SHIELD and Tony Stark would be able to do the same thing with their billion-dollar tech at their disposal? SHIELD has plenty of resources used for tracing energy signatures, which Tony and Bruce have routinely utilized in the Avengers. Tony would have access to the alien tech, which Karen even remarks on when Peter comes across another one of these energy cores.
That glowy thing is an explosive Chitauri energy core.
So with all the exotic material that Tony Stark and SHIELD collect and have strong intel on, don't you think they'd want to study this stuff so they have ways of tracing it the same way Vulture's crew did? With their intellect and resources, this shouldn't be a problem for them, especially if Vulture's crew is capable of this with significantly less resources. So from 2012 to 2016, Tony Stark and SHIELD somehow didn't trace the alien tech back to Vulture's hideout, despite the fact that his crew would routinely make use of the alien tech to make their weapons. Tony would have tracked down Vulture's crew in a heartbeat alongside anyone who bought and used their weapons, and the plot is now over. I'd also say that Bruce Banner would help out if Tony couldn't, or any of the highly intelligent scientists working for SHIELD. Not only that, but SHIELD has super advanced surveillance technology, so advanced that it allowed them to spot Loki in Germany by just having access to what his face looks like.
We're sweeping every wirelessly accessible camera on the planet. Cell phones, laptops. If it's connected to a satellite, it's eyes and ears for us.
Got a hit. Cross-match, 79%. Stuttgart, Germany. All security cameras in the city go through this monitor right here. Scan all open sources, phones, computers, PDAs. If someone tweets about this guy, I want to know about it.
If SHIELD makes use of their surveillance technology, especially if they've traced where these alien materials are, it's over for Vulture. SHIELD would especially be on top of this when you consider how Fury remarks on how the world is changing in recent years.
Last year, Earth had a visitor from another planet who had a grudge match that leveled a small town. We are hopelessly, hilariously outgunned. The world's filling up with people who can't be matched. They can't be controlled.
And it's not just SHIELD that has strong surveillance technology. Over the years, Tony has been developing his own system, which he utilized to break into one of the Hydra bases.
Jarvis, what's the view from upstairs?
The central building is protected by some kind of energy shield.
Later on, Spider-Man takes on a group of criminals who bought these weapons from Vulture's crew. This seems to be the beginning of any superheroes or law enforcement agencies looking into the alien tech weapons on the street. This is the first time our main characters seem to be hearing about it, and we do have this line from Vulture.
8 years. Not a word from the feds, nothing from those Halloween costume-wearing bozos up there in Stark Tower. And then all of a sudden, this little bastard in red tights shows up.
There hasn't been any noise regarding the alien tech weapons on Vulture's end all this time, despite the fact he's been selling these weapons for years. Was this simply the first time it was ever heard of in the public eye? Because if so, this is a problem for a multitude of reasons. First of all, for 4 years, Vulture's crew would have been making and selling these alien weapons to criminals in New York. They've been making enough money to live off this for 4 years after they faced a severe loss of money that could make them lose their homes, which speaks to the frequency and profitability of their sales. Second of all, I brought up earlier that Stark and SHIELD should already be looking for the alien material in the first place and outlined why they'd be able to. So any crimes that have been committed with these weapons should have already caught the attention of SHIELD, the FBI, and the Avengers. And even if they didn't find anything from the crimes themselves, that would at least put them in the know on the fact that there are weapons out there being used, and constantly scanning the energy pulses would lead to consistent results inside Vulture's base, since they often test these weapons in there. The fact there have been crimes committed with the alien tech weapons shouldn't be new information for the FBI. But on top of this, the initial bank robbery is what gets Tony Stark to listen to Peter and call the FBI.
I did listen, kid. Who do you think called the FBI, huh?
The FBI becomes aware of this soon after Peter does, and they already have their leads on the Vulture's crew within a week. So if the FBI was made aware years earlier as they should have, then the Vulture's crew should have been caught long before Spider-Man even existed, especially with Iron Man's help. The plot is further damaged by the fact that Peter learns of how the Vulture's crew obtains their materials moving forward. They've been consistently stealing from Damage Control for years, and their existence still isn't even known. These trucks have very little security measures despite Tony Stark signing on to these terms. In the MCU, where the technology is highly advanced and superhumans exist, alongside high levels of corruption within high positions of power, there should be a lot more security measures for alien technology, which gave the Avengers a hard time. The Vulture can just enter the truck without any armed guards or security cameras witnessing this. He's able to open these crates so casually, as if they weren't under lock and key. Even if they were, and he just broke the locks with brute force, this sets off no alarms whatsoever. Tony Stark signed off on this. If the Vulture has done this for years, then Damage Control would be aware of it since the first robbery. On the second robbery, they definitely increased their security, maybe even have Tony Stark in a suit watching over some of these drives. That's not even touching upon how much security would increase upon the discovery of how deeply corrupted the US government was because of Hydra. Whether it be Iron Man or armed guards, Vulture shouldn't be able to reach these trucks without resistance, and his existence should have been known years ago. He should have been caught years ago. Already, that's several major reasons as to why the entire plot should have ended before we even reached the present day.
For why Tony never compensated the Vulture or knew of the Vulture, because he is so far removed from the day-to-day duties at Stark Industries.
He'd still have to sign on before making agreements with Damage Control. There would be terms they'd have to set for the joint venture, and out of basic principle, he would ensure that these workers are well paid, even if Damage Control doesn't care.
You could argue that Damage Control should have caught on way early. We'll give you that. Think about it this way. This entire movie is telling us that these big organizations don't care about the little guy.
Well, the basis for why Damage Control should have caught on is because of their poor security measures. And remember, this is very important here. If Stark is agreeing to aid in the collection of these exotic materials because they're dangerous in the wrong hands, why doesn't he set up terms of security standards? Was there no discussion of having guards or cameras to keep track of what goes on in the truck? I think what's really key here is that in the plane scene in Homecoming, we specifically see that there's alien tech on the flight. We're also told that Thor's magic belt is on here, which means that Damage Control is allowing Tony to hold these resources as well. Because again, there's a shared agreement between the two as to how they obtain the alien tech. If that agreement is met, there would have to also be an agreement about how to secure it. And if the security was competent, Vulture probably wouldn't even be able to break in. And even if he did, they would know that he exists, long before the main plot of this movie even starts.
Adrian Toomes uses that to his advantage by committing minor heists flying under Damage Control's radar. It isn't until a friendly neighborhood hero shows up, shuts his quiet operation down, proving that the Avengers aren't enough. Spider-Man is needed.
Okay, but Spider-Man shouldn't have to be needed. A camera would have caused Vulture to be discovered. A guard would have caused Vulture to be discovered. S.H.I.E.L.D. tracking the alien tech, or even spying on the groups that signed contracts within the city, would have given away what the Vulture was doing before Spider-Man existed. Now, this last video is directly addressing my video on Homecoming, so we're at the home stretch. Let's do this.
This is one of the worst attempts at criticizing Peter's character arc in Spider-Man Homecoming.
I do find it jarring how easily Peter glosses over the events of Civil War. He grew up admiring the Avengers and what they do, so you'd think that the events of Civil War would be somewhat stressful to him. Half of the Avengers have been split up and sent to prison as a result of a major fallout that Spider-Man had to witness and be involved in. Brody almost died in the airport fight. I think he'd be really concerned about his survival, and in spite of this, acts like this is the best day of his life, and that's just bizarre to me. I understand that Spider-Man's really excited to be an Avenger, and how the glory of that can impede his judgment, but I still think the story stretches this too far, considering that Peter still has basic empathy for people, even his villains.
You mean the empathy he had for his villain after he completed his character arc?
Peter's character arc isn't to care about people. He already agreed not to kill bad guys.
Hey, come on, you're gonna shoot somebody shooting me!
Activating instant kill.
No, I don't want to kill anybody.
I'm not sure where you got the idea that Peter saving the Vulture is a part of his character progression. He's always had a no-kill rule. And I'm not criticizing that he saves the Vulture, I'm completely okay with that. That's one of the best moments for MCU Spider-Man. I'm criticizing, well, not even criticizing, I'm remarking on the fact that Peter would have empathy for the people he's throwing in jail, and therefore it's worthy of criticism that he doesn't have much of a reaction.
Also, when is it ever established that Peter looked up to these fools when he was growing up?
Well, for starters, he explicitly states that he's a big fan of Captain America.
Captain, big fan, Spider-Man.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Just...
Hey, everyone.
Good job.
And in Peter's vlog, he starts fanboying all over the Avengers.
Okay, there's Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow,
Whoa, who's that new guy?
I should also add that him wanting to join the team in the first place is reliant on some form of idolization there.
The entire reason he was there was to take down Captain America and his supposed crazy best friend.
No one has actually told me why I'm in Berlin.
Yes, but that gets outdated when Bucky gets proven innocent, and Cap is still on the run in spite of this. The larger point I was leading to is that this would naturally result in Peter learning the basics of the Sokovia Accords, which is the larger reason Team Cap is on the run. And the problem here is that he would realize that the Accords essentially state that you're supposed to look the other way on any occasion the government chooses, which I think is antithetical to Peter's beliefs.
After he realized he was pretty good at kicking ass, Peter let it get to his head, gaining tunnel vision for one specific goal, taking that next step and being an Avenger. About the Rhodey thing, Peter was knocked out when he almost died.
Peter was not knocked out. He was shown to regain consciousness when Tony arrived to check on him. He's only laying on the floor because he's injured, which is not the same as being knocked out. But even if he wasn't looking, this would still come up in conversation because Peter would still have investment in if the mission was successful. If he asked Tony if they caught him, he would say no and explain what happened.
Plus, he's a teenager. He's not going to understand the full context of this situation.
That doesn't mean he's going to be okay with the fact that the Avengers are split, some of which have been seriously hurt. The fact that this doesn't come up anywhere is questionable for his character.
He just wants to be an Avenger, and if you're saying you wouldn't want to be an Avenger at 15, I don't believe.
I'm not Spider-Man, so I don't care what I would do, but if I were Spider-Man, I'd at least question Tony on why he believes how we use our powers should fall into the hands of the government, which is not something he ever questions when he should. Never comes up in the trilogy.
From what we know about Peter from Civil War, I find it questionable how Peter actually thinks about the implications of joining the Avengers. Peter isn't Spider-Man for any kind of reward. Peter is Spider-Man because he has the power to help people, and if he doesn't use it, bad things will happen because of him. If he has any investment in the Avengers and what they do, he's going to care about the fact that they've split up and would want to know why.
He does, but Tony's only given him surface level details like Cap's wrong and I'm right. But let's hear this guy's counter to that.
Peter believing that Cap is protecting the UN bomber only works in the short term because he would eventually learn that Bucky was proven innocent. Bucky was proven innocent?
I'm sorry, but when would Peter have learned that information? Bucky was never proven innocent in a court of law. He fucking dipped to Wakanda.
Bucky didn't bomb the UN. Zemo framed him for that, and also pretended to be a doctor to activate the Winter Soldier. And the entire basis for Tony believing Cap has gone crazy is believing Bucky actually did those things.
Your old war buddy killed innocent people yesterday.
And Tony himself would make sure it's known that Bucky is innocent, because that's what he believes.
The fake doctor is actually Colonel Helmut Zemo.
Let's reroute the satellites. Start facial scanning for this Zemo guy. Because that is the fellow who's supposed to interrogate Barnes. Clearly, I made a mistake. Sam, I was wrong. And why are you here? Maybe your story's not so crazy.
Sure, Zemo's arrest could have proven Bucky's innocent, but one, we're never shown that.
We don't need to be shown for this to be true. If Zemo is arrested for crimes that Bucky was accused of, everyone would put two and two together and realize that Bucky was being framed. I mean, that's why Zemo is in prison after all. He framed Bucky for those crimes.
2, I doubt Peter keeps up with the 6 p.m. news.
You don't need to catch up with the news at 6 p.m. for information like this to be discovered. This would be all over social media, and I'm not buying that Peter wouldn't keep up with something important like this, considering it's in relation to arresting Captain America and the fact that he has personal investment in the Avengers. And again, Tony would have explained this to him and the media.
Plus, all of your problems about Peter wanting to be an Avenger are solved by the end of the film when he doesn't become a fucking Avenger.
That doesn't address all my problems because he never confronts Tony at the end on how the Avengers operate when Peter would find it immoral. I mentioned this in the video. Peter fundamentally doesn't agree with inaction. If Peter from the very beginning of the film didn't understand this, he surely would at the end of the film, where he confronts Tony on none of this. He doesn't even talk to Tony about the Accords and what it means for the safety of the world. It's a dead subject to Peter, and that's the end for him.
Even though he doesn't stand up to the Accords, not like he could do much in that regard.
Why not at least try? You know, like what he did in the same movie when he thought Tony wasn't taking the alien tech weapon seriously enough. Why not explain to him how problematic the Accords are? The Avengers are responsible for the safety of the world, yet Tony is defending a policy that forces them to hunt down Team Cap and arrest them, because they don't agree with a policy that Peter would never support. It's a weird defense to say that Peter probably can't change anything anyway to justify him not standing up for his beliefs.
But he chooses to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, where these Accords will restrict him less, where he'll only have to worry about cops and like the FBI.
No, the Accords still apply even if you're not an Avenger. Black Panther wasn't an Avenger, yet he still gets in trouble for interfering, until he agrees to work under the Accords. You think Wanda can just publicly disassociate with the Avengers and suddenly be less restricted now? Because if that's apparently something you can do to avoid the restrictions of the Accords, Accords? Well, way to undermine the entire conflict of that movie.
Anyways, this guy goes on to compare Spider-Man Homecoming to Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 3, where we saw one of Spider-Man's first attempt at joining the Avengers, praising the book for executing the story concept way better, as Spider-Man refused to join the team when he realized their morals didn't match up with his. What he fails to highlight is this whole ordeal was a misunderstanding. Peter thought the Avengers wanted to hunt the Hulk. This dumbass didn't realize they wanted to help the Hulk.
Whether the Avengers were misunderstood by Peter is irrelevant to the point being made. Peter believes their morals don't align, so he didn't join the team. Also, where did I state in the video that the Avengers weren't trying to help the Hulk? I said that Peter sees hints that their morals don't align, which is a matter of his perspective.
This isn't to say that a movie has to be like the comics, but the comics did this so much better because when Peter sees clear hints that the methods of the Avengers don't align with his principles, he realizes that the team isn't for him because he refuses to sacrifice his principles, that he believes can mean the difference between life and death.
Whether Peter sees the situation the right way or the wrong way doesn't address how he would act under his understanding of the situation.
No, we can excuse comic Peter for this misunderstanding, but not MCU Spider-Man. No, he needs to be hyper-competent 24/7.
So what's the misunderstanding in Homecoming? That he didn't know the basics of the Accords? I explained in the video why he should know about it, even ignoring the fact that it's public information and he would be invested due to the fact that it affects all superheroes. He would personally want to know why Cap is still being hunted despite Bucky being innocent of the crimes he was accused of, which Tony himself believes and would make sure is known. Peter would be personally invested in why his heroes are now being split, even after Bucky was proven to be framed. There's no way he simply doesn't find out about a major restriction that all superheroes face. If he did find out, he'd view Tony Stark and the idea of joining the Avengers in a different light. Now, let's run with what he's saying anyway. Even if Peter didn't know about the Accords at all, and Tony simply left out crucial details about the conflict, then that is just blatant manipulation from Tony's part. Why should we be rooting for Peter to regain Tony's respect? Why should Peter have something to prove to someone who manipulated him? Why should we be happy with Tony being his mentor figure if he omitted information that would change Peter's support of him in the Avengers? And why doesn't Peter confront Tony, or at least reflect on this at any point in his trilogy? Even if this were within Peter's character, the trilogy never challenges Peter on this or has him overcome this flaw. And what the comic we're talking about shows is that the story is aware that Peter was working off a misunderstanding. Therefore, we shouldn't be completely on board with how he handled himself. Morally speaking, he stands by his beliefs, but the misunderstanding still prevented them from working together to help the Hulk. That's pretty much all I have to respond to. I think these were interesting topics to address, and I'm definitely open to discussing with him if he's interested. If not, it's no big deal. I still enjoyed breaking down the counterpoints in detail. If you have a disagreement, feel free to join my occasional Disagreement Day streams that I do on the channel. If there's a video you want to recommend me to respond to, you can always join my main Discord server, and go to the Response Video Suggestions channel to link content. That's all I've got for now. Subscribe if you want more of these videos, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.